Welcome to the Leadership Lovers Podcast. I'm your host, Will Gladhart, CMO at the Culture Think Tank. At the Culture Think Tank, we empower leaders with metrics that strengthen culture, drive performance, and return. We're here today to learn about the actions leaders have taken to address organizational change. Today, our guest is Adam Povlitz, CEO and President of Anago Cleaning Systems. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Great. Well, let's begin by having you share with our audience a bit about yourself, your background, and your organization.
Sure. I am, as you said, the CEO and President of Anago Cleaning Systems. We are a commercial cleaning franchise brand, but we are a little bit different from franchise brands that most people are familiar with because while most brands are a two-tier system, right? So McDonald's and then the people that own the restaurants, right? We are a three-tier system. So it's a bit unique in that we have our corporate office, and then what we have is what's called a master franchise. And then we underneath the master franchise, we have what's called a unit franchise. And so if you just think of it more like most commercial cleaning is done at night, it's probably easier mentally to say like the day job versus the night job. The master franchise handles the day job. So it's the sales, marketing, and accounting. And then the unit franchisee owns the janitorial business and they learn the chemicals, the equipment, hire the crews, and keep the buildings clean. And we've found that the model works really well because it allows for people who maybe are looking to get into business but aren't quite sure how and not, maybe don't have the business background. They can start a business inexpensively at the unit franchise level, or if someone has a corporate background and knows how to manage a sales team or a customer service team, they can come in at the master franchise level. So it creates a cool synergy where the master franchise does absolutely zero cleaning, but they're in the cleaning business.
Mm-hmm.
And the unit franchise gets all the clients that they need to grow their business, but doesn't have any sales reps or sales staff that they have. So everyone kind of works together and saves money on overhead.
Yeah, that's really interesting, especially giving the opportunity of someone who wants to get in business because, a lot of the time I hear from business owners, they're like, oh, I didn't realize I had to be the salesperson and the accountant and the biz lead, biz dev guy and all this stuff. I got into this because I love doing something. So thank you for sharing that. I think when we talked briefly, you kind of have an interesting story about how you got into this business.
Yeah. I mean, so my father founded the business in
Mhm.
1989. I never wanted to get into the quote unquote, family business or anything like that. My background's actually corporate finance. I was with IBM for a little while in New York. And then during the 2008, 2009 recession that we all lived through, IBM did this huge mass round of layoffs. I wasn't laid off. I was actually one of the analysts reviewing. I didn't have names, I had employee numbers. And I was reviewing who got basically without having a name, who got the golden parachute, whose parachute was not so golden. And it leaves quite a sour taste in your mouth for corporate America. I happened to be I happened to be down for the holidays visiting my dad, and he said, "You got to check this whole Anago thing out. I think I might have the tiger by the tail." And it was about 6 months later that I joined Anago, and he literally goes, "I don't even know anybody who says this, but he said, congratulations on leaving your highfalutin finance job." Highfalutin, that was the word. I remember that for some reason. You left your highfalutin finance job and your first job at Anago. You're going to be a telemarketer by day and a franchisee's assistant at night cleaning a daycare. So I went from the old white shirt, blue suit of IBM to jeans and a t-shirt scrubbing toilets and taking out 55-gallon drums full of diapers.
Well, that's definitely a different mindset shift, especially for a leader as well. Adam, we're going to be discussing 3 questions today. As a warm up to start our conversation, would you share why you believe a healthy culture is critical?
Sure. I think the old cliche about culture eating strategy for breakfast, it's always comes true. No amount of strategy or planning can make up for a disconnected culture. I think when people feel like they're part of something that matters, they're going to work harder, they're going to push further, and it creates a creative environment where people can thrive rather than an oppressive place where people are avoiding being punished.
Right. I think that's really great insight for others to hear. And we specifically can prove numerically that and I'm sure you've seen it in your bottom line, that when people are engaged, when they're incentivized, when they're connected to the organization, they understand their role, there's an increase in performance across the board. and everyone understands what they're supposed to be doing and moving in the same direction. It's been our experience that leaders tend to struggle in three key areas: people, process, or profits, or a combination of those. In your role as CEO, could you identify which one of these areas represented a cultural challenge within your organization?
Ours would probably be really focused on people for two reasons. Number one, we are a franchise organization, so the culture within our organization, obviously, we can have a direct impact on, but then the culture in our franchisees organizations and then the unit franchisees organizations as well. It's multiple layers down, and trying to impart that culture, the Anago culture across multiple layers is definitely not for the weak-willed. And then secondarily, I think it's all about bringing in the right hires. I would say I was probably, for lack of a better word, I would say I was maybe afraid to make some big splash senior level hires early on in my career. And if I was going to tell my younger self, right, it would be like, no, 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 do it now, do it right away, because it's all about the right people in the right seats.
I think that's a really interesting perspective to be able to put those people in the right seats, but also there is a tipping point where it could be too late versus where it might not quite be right, but if it's the right person, it'll make all the difference in the organization. Can you identify a challenge that negatively impacted your organization kind of around those same tenets?
I think the most key way to express it is, particularly with our franchisees, when you're not in the office, quote unquote, like the classic in the office together, building that culture, it's
Right.
very easy for them to feel disconnected. They have things they need to continue growing their business, and they don't feel like they're being heard. It's how do you get people who you don't see every day, you might only be in front of in person once or twice a year, to buy into a larger vision and mission and the direction that you want to take the organization and ultimately take it to the next level. And it turns into something where it's like it's not your mission statement. It's not the employee handbook, right? It has to be lived, it has to be reinforced through real interactions with real people.
Yeah, and I think you expressed you have a particular challenge in not only are there franchisees that are part of the one division of the organization, and there's franchisees that have are part of another part of the organization or that third tier, and creating that balance, but also the outreach as a leader to those different groups of people, and how do you bring them all together as one, I think is a challenge that most of us would be thinking that that would be kind of something big to overhaul. Maybe what was the one thing you did or identified that helped impact some of those challenges across the board?
So I think that tipping point for us was actually all happened kind of during COVID. During COVID, everyone's going, kind of, what do we do next? What's going on? And we had to make it a point to regularly communicate with the entire system. Initially, it was literally twice a week, all hands on deck call. Anybody who's available, call in that day. If you can't make it, we're having one on, 2 days from now, just to say, here's the latest, here's what's going on, here's what we know, here's what we don't. And you see the all of a sudden, through this intentional communication, regular intentional communication, that people start getting aligned, people start rowing the boat in the same direction, and then deliberately, right, asking for feedback and then saying, okay, let's make sure we feel heard. So we're going to document everyone's feedback and then show kind of a public progress report of, here's what you've said are areas that are of concern or areas that you need help in, and here are the things we're specifically working on to help through that. I think it's that, and then the combination of, so we actually created during that time period and have maintained one since. In franchising, they call it a franchise advisory committee, an FAC. And what an FAC does, it's top performing franchisees deliberately from different regions around the country having a meeting, being sort of the voice of the other franchisees. They even have their own constituent franchisees that they collaborate with and have regular calls with and say, how's everything going, everybody? What do we need? What's working, what's not? And then they bring that back to us. And we have monthly meetings with our FAC, our Franchise Advisory Committee, to say what's working, what's not, what can we pivot on? And rather than waiting for the annual meeting to find out that something hasn't been working for 10 months, we're only waiting 30 days and can pivot really quickly.
Yeah, I love that you shared that because that's a lot of the part of the work we do as the culture think tank, but also within our analytic performance solutions is looking for that consistent feedback every 30 days. And I love that you've created not only a structure, but something to be extremely proactive across the board versus reactive, as you said, where 6 to 12 months has passed and everyone's like, well, that doesn't really matter anymore. And where you're getting consistent, constant feedback so that you and the leadership can adjust, pivot, make better decisions. So, is there anything else you'd like to share with other leaders as we wrap up today?
Yeah, and kind of throughout this conversation and just kind of think, I've had to think about my career at Anago to prepare for our conversation a little bit today. And I realized that every time I've reached one of those inflection points or plateaus, I guess, that I couldn't push past, I think instinctively you want to review the process and go like, okay, what else can we do differently? What else can we do better? But in reality, it always was a person. It was always a who problem, not a how problem. It was always who do we need to help us get to the next level here rather than trying to sharpen the pencil even sharper or make the wheel even rounder. Was no, we needed more people who could think on the level of where we wanted to be versus where we were so that we weren't spinning our wheels. And ultimately, investing in the right people pays off.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's some really great advice for other leaders is thinking about probably like yourself. I tend to go back to that process and performance piece because it's sometimes easier than the people. But as you said, putting the right people on the team, positioning it for growth makes all the difference in the world. Adam, I've enjoyed having you on our Leadership Lovers podcast today. Thank you so much for your insights.
My pleasure.
Thank you for joining us on the Leadership Lovers podcast. Find all our Leadership Lovers episodes on the Culture Think Tank website at www.theculturethinktank.com or listen on your favorite streaming platform. We'd love to hear from you about the challenges you have faced as a leader. Tune in weekly as we invite leaders to share their experiences in strengthening culture and performance, one action at a time.